We welcome you to another live edition of the Sports Box, brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And by our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and check them out at www.crowdplayapp.com for details. Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
It's Friday night, and you guys know what that means. I'm here, as always, on Sweet Tea, joined by my good friend, Noah Dog Deibler, and myself, Garth Charger Patrick. As always, we're really excited to be here. End of the week, a lot of sports to talk about. We're going to kick it right off with some MLB, but first, how are you, Noah? Glad to have you here, as always, man.
I'm good. How are you?
Good, man, good. We got a lot going on in the MLB world the past week or two. Like I told Noah, I just couldn't not talk about it tonight. I know and I hope that we have a lot of baseball fans in here tonight tuning in. What crazy baseball going on, Noah. First and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to one of our guys. If you guys didn't know, me and Noah are both big-time Braves fan. Ronald Acuna Jr., man, he has been on a absolute tear. And unfortunately, as good as he's kind of been the only highlight of our team so far, as we are not off to the greatest start. Thankfully, there is a lot of time left, as it is a long season. But I'll pass the mic over to you, Noah. What are some of your thoughts so far? What have you seen out of him and the Braves as a whole?
Well, I think he's been absolutely fantastic, like you said, Garth. And I remember us talking about him a few months ago, I think, actually. And what I told you, and I think it's very important now, I said, I think he's a fantastic player. He just needs to be more patient at the plate. He needs to stop swinging every pitch, trying to knock it out of the park. And I think he's made a great step in his game. You got to remember, Garth, as great a player as he is, he's still only 23 years old. He only turned 23 in December. So he still has plenty of time to grow. But like you said, he's been off to a fantastic start. I got his stats up right here. He's leading in runs, hits, doubles, home runs, RBIs, slugging percentage, on-base plus slugging percentage, on-base plus slugging plus, which is adjusted to match your ballpark, and total bases. So, I mean, he's just absolutely killing it, like you said. Unfortunately, our team is struggling a bit to start out the gate. I think our pitching needs to improve. I think, like you said, the rest of the batters need to improve. But you got to remember, Garth, we started the season like 0-4 or something. We're now 6-8, so we have started to pick it up a little bit. It's not like, we're 0-10 or anything like that. So I think we'll be fine. I think we do have a good team. I mean, we were just in the NLCS last season. We really should have gone to the World Series, but we let that slip away. But, yeah, I think we'll be fine. But, yeah, he's off to a great start. And if some of the guys around him can start to do their part a little more, I think we're going to go on a really nice season.
Yeah, I'm definitely not over-worried myself. No, as we both said, it is still so early in the season. Obviously, there's a ton of games left to be played. And I feel like the division that we're in, we're kind of always alive and in the chase, even if we're not playing, quite where we want to be. Bullpen has kind of been shaky, and it seems like every year now for the past couple of seasons, that's been one of our biggest gripes. It can only improve. We're kind of, that's one way of looking at it, I guess, is we can only improve. I look for us to improve. Like you said, no, we were just in the ALCS, should have gone to the World Series. It's still incredibly early. We are, like you said, starting to get into gear, starting to turn things around and, playing up to the level that we should be playing. But talking about pitching, man, that's what I was really most excited to talk about tonight, other than Acuna. Talk about two near perfect games. I was actually talking about this at work earlier with one of the baseball fans that I know there. First and foremost, the one that isn't as recent as the other, Joe Musgrove for the Padres. San Diego native, grew up there, went to high school there. So, that was really so for him. Unfortunately, same thing with the White Sox game. The only thing that kept him from having that perfect game was hitting a batter early on. So absolute caps off to him. As somebody who isn't a Padres fan, but being a Chargers fan, I definitely do have some, love and sentiment towards the San Diego area. That was really cool to see. And, just it couldn't have been any cooler for not only them to almost have the perfect game, but it to be a San Diego native and somebody who grew up there, as I said.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very historical moment, Garth, not just because obviously it was a no-hitter, but that was actually the first no-hitter the Padres have ever had. They were the only team in the MLB without one before that happened. So I think it's absolutely remarkable to see that happen. Joe Musgrove, like you said, had a fantastic game. I mean, 9 innings pitched with 10 strikeouts, threw 112 pitches, 77 were strikes. And I mean, obviously, the main thing, no hits. He only hit one batter, like you said. He didn't even walk anybody. So he was pretty much as close to a perfect game as you can get without actually getting one. Um, so, big props to him. And then, like you mentioned there briefly, Carlos Rodon from the Chicago White Sox, pretty much the exact same thing. 9 innings pitched. He had 7 strikeouts, didn't walk anybody, but he hit one batter over 114 pitches. And he also gets a no hitter. So, it's kind of crazy. We basically had Rodon got robbed, but it was his fault, says Brian. But yeah, we were very close to having not one but two perfect games in about the span of a week. And considering there's only been, I'd say probably less than 30 perfect games in all of MLB history, I don't think we've had one since about 2012, and that was the year we actually had like two or three. Um, so it comes and goes. It's very rare, obviously, but sometimes you do have a bit of a fluke year, like 2012, where I believe there were three. We almost had two in the span of a week, but unfortunately, that's the thing about the perfect game. It's so rare. Sometimes, just one mistake and it's gone. But obviously, no hitter is still a fantastic achievement for those two. So props to them.
Yeah, like I said, hats off to both of those guys. And touching on a couple of things there, um, Brian is talking about Rodon, and the everybody was kind of up in arms. I mean, at least the White Sox fans, that the ideology was that the batter leaned in to get hit, and it happens in baseball. It's a part of baseball, honestly. Guys like to crowd the plate. Guys like to get away with a little bit of a lean to get on base. Personally, I do kind of feel their pain. I feel like if I were a White Sox fan, or just as a fan of baseball in general, as Noah said, perfect games, I believe it's somewhere 25, 26, 27, somewhere in there. It's definitely under 30, like Noah said. But you hate to see something like that happen to take away a perfect game. It's one thing if the guy gives up a base hit or something and there's not an error on the play, but for it to go off of questionably hitting a batter, I definitely get the anger and frustration there. But it is what it is.
Yeah, and I've been hearing a lot about this the past few weeks, Garth. Actually, it's becoming a bit of a talking point. Now, do I think you should lean in purposely to pitches to get hit? Absolutely not. I think obviously people say that's not what the rule is about or anything like that. But at the same time, I mean, if you don't make it too obvious, I mean, I'm sure some people would do that to get an advantage. You want to get on base any way you can because, like a lot of people say, hitting a baseball and getting on base is probably the toughest thing to do in all of sports. So, if you can do something and it's not completely obvious that you're doing it to get on base, I can understand that a little bit. And you also got to remember, Garth, purposely getting hit by a pitch. That's not some cowardly thing. That takes a lot of balls to do because those pitches come in fast and they can really hurt you if they hit you in the wrong area. So, I think a lot of more people should keep that in mind as well. But like you said, I just looked it up. There's only been 23 perfect games in all of MLB history. I don't have the number of no hitters. I'd say it's probably well over 100, considering there's teams that have about 20 of them. But yeah, just a very rare feat. Unfortunately, neither of them could get it. But I mean, just fantastic. The start of the season has been really good. A lot of teams just coming out swinging. Hopefully, we can get it going. But yeah, it's a very interesting start.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, Noah, is it's very similar to flops in basketball, where there's enough leniency, enough gray area within the rules that players can get away with taking a little bit of advantage. Obviously, if it's very clear and very evident, they're not going to get away with it. But there is enough wiggle room there to get a few over referees or umpires. But yeah, I grew up playing baseball, Noah, all the way from T-ball all the way up until high school. Kind of kicked myself in the butt that I didn't play in college because it was easily, the sport that I was most naturally good at and enjoyed playing. But growing up playing baseball, I was always taught and coached that it's just as good to get on base with a walk or getting hit by a pitch than it is to actually get a hit. Kind of, at least for me personally, the mindset with baseball was you just want to get on base, period. Any way to get on base is better than striking out or hitting into an out. So, can't say that I support it, but I do get it from a player and a team standpoint. And unfortunately, like I said, there is enough gray area, enough wiggle room to where guys kind of, can take advantage of a rule like that.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Garth. I think the problem with this era of MLB, and I love it. Don't get me wrong, but it's all about the home run ball. That's what everyone's focused on. Guys want to hit it out of the park, and I think that small ball element of the game is getting less and less attention. Like you said, these guys that they get on base with singles, walks, hit by pitch, stuff like that. The money ball that we can call it, as Billy Bean made it. Um, I think it's becoming less and less important and less noticed. And so I think that's when something like this happens, it gets so much attention. Now, like you said, I agree. I don't think, a guy should just, purposely keep leaning over whatever to get hit by pitches to get an advantage that way. But at the same time, as a pitcher, you have to control your pitches and know that, some people might try to do that. Um, if they can do it and make it not look obvious and you hit them, well, that's their base. So I'd say just be a little careful with it. Obviously, no one, unless something has happened early in the game to cause tension. Most of these pitchers aren't purposely trying to hit people. I'm pretty sure with Carlos Rodon's case, I believe he hit the guy with a slider. So you're obviously not going to hit someone with that. If you want to hit someone on purpose, you hit them with a fastball. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll hear about this a lot more, Garth. I've heard it mentioned a lot in the past few weeks, and quite honestly, it's something I haven't heard mentioned in a very long time.
Yeah, and one last thing before I kind of wrap us up here with baseball and shift gears here, Noah, is one thing that I want to go back to and touch on is that getting hit by a baseball, especially at the MLB level, whether it be a fastball or a breaking ball. Trust me, guys, when I've never been hit with an MLB pitch, obviously, but I can tell you just at like a varsity high school level to get hit with a pitch that, probably then was like 75, 80 miles per hour hurts really bad. And like Noah said, in the right spot can actually potentially injure you. I actually, and I hope the guy recovered from it. I never really found out, but I can remember my senior year of baseball. I hit a line drive at the third baseman, and he kind of just, froze up and didn't react, and it hit him square in the forearm. It actually broke his forearm. So, whether it be off a bat, from a pitch, whatever, it hurts a lot to get hit by a baseball, guys. So again, not saying people should, purposely be doing it all the time. But at the same time, I do, to a degree, understand the logic behind it.
Yeah,
right. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've never played baseball personally, but I've been to games. I've been to games where you're only a row or two up behind home plate, and I went to college games. I saw these guys. They can throw about 90 or 91, Garth, and you got to remember this is slow for MLB standard. You can barely see the ball, even when it's only 90 or 91 degrees or 91 miles per hour. Then take into account that these guys can throw well over 100 miles per hour at the MLB if they have the best velocity. If I saw that coming towards me, I'd say, screw getting that base. I'm getting out of the way. So I completely agree with you there. It's very dangerous. I'd say other than maybe taking, a hockey puck to the face from a slap shot, it's one of the most dangerous things that can happen to you. Especially, a pitcher takes a line drive to the head or something that goes right back at him. It's very scary. So, I think that is very important to remember, as you said.
Yeah, and just a random fact, I forget the exact number, but I remember seeing once that excuse me, the time that you have to react to an MLB pitch is insanely minuscule. I think it's like 0.3 or 0.0. It's just absurd the amount of time that you have to react to an MLB pitch to determine whether you're going to swing or it's going to be a ball. And as you said, it seems like pitching velocity as the years go on just keeps increasing and increasing. And I can't even imagine standing at the plate, let alone trying to hit a fastball that's going 100 plus miles an hour. But with that said, Noah, let's shift gears because we've kind of got a lot to touch on tonight. I do eventually want to get to the NFL, as always. That is one of our big topics. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into some NBA, as just today alone, we've gotten some big news. A guy that I know me and Noah both personally like in Dwayne Wade. It's been announced that he's bought an ownership stake in the Utah Jazz, so it was really cool to see that. Kind of see what kind of role he can play for them. They are a team that, in recent years has seemed to be on the up and up in a very tough and competitive Western Conference. So, that's really cool. I don't know exactly what kind of role he's going to have in the team, Noah. If he's going to be involved in personnel and coaching decisions and all that, or if he's just kind of going to, hold on to his ownership and kind of, just sit back and watch from afar. But either way, the type of guy he is, how the things I've seen him do in his communities, and obviously the legend that he was on the court. This is nothing but great news for the Utah Jazz as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree with you, Garth. And, like you said, I love Dwayne Wade. I thought he was a fantastic player. I think he's a great guy. And like you said, it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. Now, I've heard that he wants a more hands-on role with the team as he joins that ownership group. So we'll see what happens there. But, like you said, I'm very excited to see this. I always like to see what these players can do when they get, involved in a team in the highest order. Obviously, they can become coaches. Some become GMs and stuff like that, obviously. But to get involved in ownership, that's a big step up for a guy that, played for so long. So I'm going to be very interested to see what he can do because, like you said, Utah's a good team. They're not some trash team or anything like that. This is a team that has been, consistently making playoffs for several years. Can they take that next step in a Western Conference that is very difficult to win in? And, it's a mixed bag with these players going into management and stuff like that. Obviously, I can't predict what he's going to do, but I mean, Utah's first in the Western Conference right now, and I think they want to take that next step and become a contender. Um, so if Dwayne Wade does a good job, I definitely think they could do that. And I think you're going to see a lot more of this, Garth. I know about a week ago, it might have been, we saw that Alex Rodriguez actually purchased a stake in the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. So I think this trend of, players getting into ownership and stuff like that, I think it's actually going to become more common because, you see big names like this that pretty much everyone knows. I know even before I wasn't really into sports, you knew who Alex Rodriguez was. You knew who Dwayne Wade was. So I think this is going to become an increasing trend, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and something a little bit humorous in the NBA world that happened this week, and you mentioning A-Rod did make me remember it. Your guy out of Georgia, Anthony Edwards, and I found that pretty funny. He's like, A-Rod, who's this guy? But a lot of people were kind of giving him crap on social media. If he didn't grow up watching baseball, I get it. He is a little bit younger than us, and I will say I definitely remember Alex Rodriguez. Especially growing up a little bit north of New York City. The Yankees were always on TV and in the news. But I wouldn't say that I vividly remember him. I knew he was there. I knew, the thing with the steroids and the home runs and, all that kind of controversy, and that he played for the Yankees. But, if he grew up and he didn't watch baseball, no, little to none, I get it. Hopefully him and Alex Rodriguez can be on good terms, as he is kind of going to be above him now in the organization. But, still, that was pretty cool. I found it pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too sure about that, Garth. I know when I started watching baseball, Alex Rodriguez was on the Yankees. He was well past his prime, but, you still knew who he was. Anthony Edwards is only about 2 years younger than me. So, like you said, maybe he wasn't into baseball, but I mean, come on. I think Alex Rodriguez is one of those guys that always kind of transcended sports. Everyone kind of knew who he was. So, to be honest, I think he was just kind of living under a rock, if I'm being real with you. And the fact he said that about a guy that has just purchased a stake in his team, it is really funny. I'm sure, it's all laughs. Nothing's going to happen because of it, but it was really funny to see that. It actually kind of reminds me of, I think it was about a year or two ago when that thing came out about Ichiro Suzuki saying, who the fuck is Tom Brady? That's what it reminded me of. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have those humorous, funny moments in sports here and there. As everybody gets really competitive and takes them super serious, it is cool to have moments like that. But one last thing is, I feel like even if you didn't know him from baseball, I feel like just as many people who don't follow baseball know him because he dated and was engaged to Jennifer Lopez. Because stuff like that is always in the realm of news as well. But another thing for the Utah Jazz, kind of going back to them, unfortunately, Donovan Mitchell did go down earlier in the day. I don't think they really said the severity of the injury yet, Noah, other than he had to get helped off the floor and he is going to have to get some x-rays. So like you said, they're really hoping to take the next step in the West, as they've kind of been contending as hard as it is going to be to get past LeBron and that Lakers roster that just seems to keep improving despite LeBron's age. And they seem to keep bringing guys in, or certain guys continue to improve. So, I wish the best to him, because it's going to be a lot tougher for them to try and do that if he's going to be out for serious amounts of time.
Yeah, I'm with you, Garth. I think Donovan Mitchell's a great player. I've been a big fan of him really since he came into the league. Just looking at some quick stats right here, he's averaging 26, 4, and 5 this season, 43.8% shooting. So, he was having a great season, obviously. Hopefully it's not too severe. I know we've had a lot of severe injuries lately in the MLB. I know I saw Jamal Murray went down. He's one of my favorite players in the league, so that one sucked. I think I heard Victor Oladipo, got hurt as well. So a lot of people going down, Garth. It's a brutal season. You got to remember, only a few months ago, these guys were playing, in a bubble to finish the playoffs. And, now they got to get back to the grind of another regular season and then go for another playoffs. So it's definitely not easy for them.
Yeah, and actually, that kind of gives me an idea, something to discuss here real quick. No, that's a little bit off topic and unplanned. But speaking of injuries, I saw a really cool post right before we got on here, and it asked if you could pick any player of all time at any sport to have a injury-free career, who would you pick? And when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is one that I've personally never thought of. I didn't really put like a ton of thought into it and try and come up with like a list of different guys and pick my favorite from the list. The first guy that came to mind for me personally, Noah, was Tiger Woods, because for those of you who don't know, in his younger days, he absolutely dominated golf. It was like the LeBron James, Michael Jordan type effect in the golf industry. When that guy played and was 100%, it was very, very clear that dude was easily the best guy out there, even though he didn't win every single event, which in golf doesn't happen anyways, no matter how good a player is. It's just one of those sports where, if you just have a little bit of an off day or weekend, it's very, very easy to slip up and, find yourself not in contention for a win. But man, he was absolutely unreal. I know I've gone back and watched a lot of like highlights of rounds from golf that I unfortunately didn't get to watch. Due to him coming up in, my really early days. I would not have vividly remembered that back then. But then he had the back injuries, had to have multiple surgeries. He still has nagging injuries now that he's tried to, get through. So that was my pick. Another really good one that I saw, and I'd probably put right up towards the top of my list as well, is Derrick Rose. But kind of interested to hear your take on that one, Noah.
Yeah, I saw that post, Garth, as well. And, obviously I put a little inside reference on that post. I didn't actually give a serious answer for it because it's a tough question, Garth. From all the sports to pick just one player, like you said, I think Tiger Woods is a great choice now. I'm not big into golf, but, I know all about all the back surgeries and stuff he's had. So considering all he's accomplished with those problems, to see what he could do without that would have been interesting. But I think for me, it's really hard to name just one. I'll probably just name a few. Obviously, football is my favorite sport, so if I had to pick some from there, the first guy that comes to mind for me is Robert Griffin III, because I thought he was a fantastic talent coming into the league, and unfortunately, like we all know, he had that horrific knee injury against the Seahawks. Was never the same after that. I think it would have been nice to see what he could do without that. I also think of another guy from that exact same draft class who only retired about a year or two ago, Andrew Luck. Obviously, he had to retire because of, the lingering issues that he had behind that terrible offensive line. I think that would have been a great one as well. I think Derrick Rose is a good choice. I think if you look at MLB, you can think of a guy like Ken Griffey who had a lot of problems. And, if I just want to be biased a little bit, what if Mario, I don't know if you want to count it, but if Mario Lemieux never had that cancer, what could he have accomplished in his career as well? Another one, just real quick, if I want to be biased for my Georgia Bulldogs, if Todd Gurley never had arthritis in his knees, I think he'd still be one of the top 3 or 5 backs in the NFL right now. But, it's interesting to think about, Garth. There's a lot of what if scenarios out there for all these great talents, Fortunately, injuries suck, man. They can happen to the best.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good picks there. One guy I didn't even think about at all was Todd Gurley, because as we know, that's a guy absolutely insane flashes of numbers and skill on the field. And unfortunately, that knee injury, anything knee injury, especially for a running back, minor or severe, is really, really tough to be at 100%. And honestly, it's such a tough position to play that if you're not at 100%, it's really, really hard to be one of the best in the league, let alone, be a starter on a professional football team. But yeah, let's switch gears again, Noah, keep this kind of going. Before we jump over to football and the draft and free agency and, college football, there's a little bit of exciting news there. Let's go ahead and touch on NHL real quick. This, at least for my team, the Lightning, the Central Division is really, really just been a dogfight lately. Noah, the Hurricanes have been playing really good. We've had some really tough, brutal games with the Panthers. They're looking to stay up there towards the top. And we did just lose Steven Stamkos. I've yet to see how severe it is, and I don't think they really know yet either. So obviously that's going to be really tough. We are kind of around I believe we're getting close to that midway point of the season. I'm starting to get really excited for postseason, hoping to have Kucherov back. And another thing too is I think that we have some Flyers fans either in the group or I don't know if they're watching, but in the group, they're kind of super underachieving so far. I know there's a lot of frustration out of that. But speaking on that, Noah, how is your Penguins doing in that division as a whole?
I think we're actually doing really good, Garth. I think we got off to a horrific start. But since then, we've really turned it around. We're third in the East Division right now with 57 points in 43 games. We have a game at hand on the Islanders and Capitals above us, so we could potentially move up to second in that division. I think we've done really well, Garth, lately. 7-2-1 in our last 10, goal difference of plus 27. I think we're actually doing really solid. I'm still not sold on our defense. I think we got a lot of pile-ons on there, like Cody Ceci, who's absolutely terrible, that we need to kind of, move on from and hopefully get some new guys in there. But I think our offense, it's solid as usual, obviously, with guys like Crosby and Malkin. And then so you got secondary guys like Jake Gensel and Brian Rust. I've been actually very impressed with us. I don't expect us to win the cup or anything like that, Garth. I'm one of those realistic Penguins fans. I never expected that for the season. But the fact we're in a solid playoff spot like this, especially at the terrible start we had, I'm actually pretty happy with that.
Yeah, and we did just have the trade deadline come up. I personally didn't see any huge deals, which I could be wrong on that. There could have been one that I missed. Post-trade deadline deal, we're kind of looking at, pretty much the same situation that we were before. Maybe a couple of teams improved a little bit, or, if they didn't improve in terms of win-loss potential, they might have cleared up some space headed into next season. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried, Noah. I think we're going to be fine come postseason. Don't get me wrong. We obviously don't have any idea for sure at this point, but I do expect Cooch to be back. I'm really kind of hoping that he's going to be back because I don't believe his injury was as serious or time-consuming of a rehab as Stamkos had last season. And even though it was short-lived, he made it back. But the reason why I say I'm a little bit worried is, Cooch is out, as I mentioned. Stamkos now goes down for who knows how long. Stuff like that can really throw off the mojo, the lines of your team. And if we hit a little bit of a slump, like I said, this division is playing really, really well. We're not running away with it, even though we are playing good ourselves. So I don't want to see us fall too far back, Noah. I really want us to have, home ice advantage, obviously, as they are allowing limited crowds already. Hopefully we get full capacity or close to full capacity by playoffs. So obviously home ice this season, whether it be big or small, is going to have, some kind of difference maker. As we all know, fans being in the stands absolutely has, some sort of effect. We're going to have to wait and see how many fans are allowed to know, if it's going to be to full effect or not. But, that's kind of my reasoning there. I don't want us to slip too far back, Noah.
I tell you what, Garth, that Central Division is way closer than I honestly thought it would be. I remember when we did our massive NHL preview show a few months ago when we had Brian on, and he was saying you guys will pretty much win that division. It won't even be close. And I was agreeing with him, but so far it has been way closer than I thought. Obviously, like you said, the Panthers, they're right behind you with 59 points. Now you do have a game in hand on them with 60 points. So, but Garth, the Hurricanes have honestly come out of nowhere, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're a bad thing or anything like that, but pretty much every time we talked about the NHL and the Central Division so far this season, The only team we've really talked about besides the Lightning have been the Panthers. And all of a sudden, the Hurricanes go to the top with the game in hand on you guys, so they could potentially go, 2 points ahead of you with that game in hand. Um, I think that division has been way more competitive than I thought it would be. And like you said, having Kucherov and Stamkos out could play a big role in that. Now, like I've said several times, I think you guys have great depth to counteract that. I think you're going to have to probably rely a lot more on our guy Braden Point than you might like to. Um, Nothing against him, but when two of your best players out like that, guard, it's going to be really tough. I think they're probably going to be keying in on Braden Point a lot because he's probably I wouldn't say he's your only superstar left. I think you still have to account for Victor Hedman, who's fantastic, but in your forward core, I'd say he's probably the best guy left. So, I think they're going to be focusing in on him a lot, and it's probably going to be tougher than anything you've seen so far this season because you guys have kind of hit a little bit of a skid. The Panthers and the Hurricanes are both 6-3-1 in their last 10 games, so they're hot right now. It's going to be very interesting, Garth. And to be honest with you, no disrespect to those teams. I never thought it would be this close.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you, Noah. I definitely was thinking that the Panthers were going to be in the mix. I didn't really pick them to win. Obviously, I did go with my Lightning, but I felt that they were going to be right there, not too far behind. Not completely out of contention for that number one overall spot. And I felt like either the Hurricanes or the Predators would play real, pretty good. But as you said, I definitely did not expect it to be this close. And I pulled up an article here, and unfortunately, it's not looking very good for Steven Stamkos. They asked John Cooper about it earlier today. And to me, reading his comments reminds me a lot of last season where he's kind of dancing around the question with, well, he's getting placed on the long-term IR, but that doesn't mean he couldn't be back this season. We don't really know. We don't really know the severity or the exact circumstances of his injury, and that's kind of what we heard all last season. And as soon as I saw the words lower body, that really, really got me worried because we all know that's exactly what he's been battling with. That's what he had the surgery on. That's what, kept him out last season. And the reason why we only saw him in that quick stint in the Stanley Cup Finals was because he literally tore his groin coming back and on that play making the goal. So, as a Stamkos fan, as a Lightning fan, that really, really worries me a little bit. He did say that they still do expect Cooch to be back for postseason play. But like I said, we got to get there first, and we can't fall too far behind. As you said, Braden Point, obviously, we're going to need a lot of offensive presence from him. Our guy, Victor Hedman, he's obviously going to lead the team and play well, and we might need to see him play even a little bit better. And thankfully, we got Vasilevsky in goal because that guy's been on fire this season. He has the highest save percentage in the league, and he does have the highest win total by one in the league as well. So we're going to be really, really counting on him as well. And every year I think he surprised me a little bit more because he's had a couple of shutouts this year. Like I said, Noah, as always, I feel like he's always very, very good. He doesn't shut a lot of teams out. He does let some goals up, but he never has a bad performance. And I think that's what makes him one of the best in the league is he's pretty much immune to having a complete breakdown in a terrible game where he lets up, like an ungodly amount of goals and they have to pull him out. So, obviously we're going to need a lot out of him. And again, like I said, we just can't fall too far back. We got to stay up there in contention for that number one overall seed come postseason.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much in agreement with you there, Garth. I think Vasilevsky, he's had a few seasons where he was that really elite guy that was mentioned as one of the best in the NHL. But he's had a few down years. Obviously, he started his career off a little slow. I'd say I wouldn't say he wasn't terrible or anything. He was still very good, but he hasn't been this good his entire career. Garth, this is a career year for him. This is him showing he wants to take that next step and be the best goalie in the league. You got to remember, Garth, even though he was drafted, I believe, all the way back in 2012, he's still only 26 years old. This is still a very young goaltender in his prime years. And with goalies, they can go, into their mid to late 30s if they're very good. So he's going to be there hopefully for a long time for you guys, and I think he'll only get better. Like you said, it sucks with Steven Stamkos. I love him as a player. There's a reason I asked for him to be the guy in that jersey you sent me for that playoff thing. But, the problem with him, Garth, he's a fantastic player. He always gets injured. And, I think it was awesome how he came back for that one game last year for you guys. And, he had a great game in that Stanley Cup Finals. but I don't want to see another, kind of thing like that, like it was last season for him, to where, every single game is like, is Stamkos coming back? And it turns out he doesn't. Unfortunately, I think that, like you said, with him going on the long-term injured reserve, as John Cooper said, I think we might see something like that. And, that's really sad to see, because I'm glad he won that Stanley Cup. I think he deserved a Stanley Cup for the career he's had. But you'd like to contribute, like him to contribute to one a lot more than just that one game where he scored that goal. You'd like him to be one of the best players on the team and potentially win a Conn Smythe. Unfortunately, it looks like they might have to win another one without him, which I think they can do. But you want your captain to be there for you, Garth. You want to win for your captain. He's going to play for you and all that. To play without your captain, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be very tough for him to do it back to back.
Right. And as I said earlier, there is going to be fans, at least to some capacity. So it makes it only even more difficult. And talking about all this makes me realize that he definitely could have been towards the top of my list. That whole, players you wish you could take all of their injuries away over the course of their career. Because he's had some fantastic numbers, but who knows what they could have been if he, didn't have to battle all these injuries. But with that said, Noah, let's go ahead and let's jump right over to some NFL. I know most of our viewers, that's kind of what they get most excited, most involved with. It seems like we have a lot of big-time football fans out there, just like me and Noah ourselves. And with that, a little bit of controversy came out today. I wouldn't really call it controversy, but I would say it's controversy in the fact that people will debate it and, get a little bit fired up over it. And that's Vegas released the win total odds for the season. Up at the top, they have KC with an over-under of 12 wins, Tampa Bay 11.5, Baltimore and Green Bay 11, Buffalo and the Rams. This one kind of shocked me a little bit. I don't know. I can never fully buy in on the Rams because I feel like they're always going to let me down in a big-time game, but they're there at 10.5. Cleveland, Indy, San Fran, and Seattle at 10, Dallas, New Orleans, Tennessee at 9.5, and so on and so on. But yeah, I think towards the top, they probably got it, relatively right. KC, we're going to have to wait and see how that offensive line plays, Noah, because as good as Patrick Mahomes is, obviously, as I've said time and time again, offensive line is incredibly important in the NFL. And I think, honestly, that's exactly what we saw in the Super Bowl. We saw them get dominated on both sides of the line. And yes, there is very, very good offensive linemen available in the draft. But you got to realize that, hey, you got two, not one, but two big positions that fell on the offensive line with them losing both of their veteran starting offensive tackles. And the draft, as much as we hype up players, is kind of honestly a complete crapshoot because you could take a guy in the 7th round who plays like a rookie of the year, and you can take a guy first overall and obviously ends up being a major bust. So that's kind of my biggest question mark for them. I think Patrick Mahomes will have a good year. The offensive weapons are still there with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and company. And, the defense won't be great, but it'll be pretty good. So, I guess I can see it, but if the offensive line doesn't play good, it may make probably the number 1 seed in the AFC, but the AFC West as a whole, very, very interesting. But enough of me. Noah, what's kind of your thoughts on that list? And if anything kind of jumps out at you?
I'll be honest with you, Garth. I don't really pay attention to the Vegas odds that much. I think they're kind of a crapshoot, kind of like the NFL draft where, we're just kind of guessing. And I think it's very hard for us to also kind of predict stuff like that when you still got the NFL draft to come. Someone might sign some more free agents. I don't think there'll be anyone major, but that free agency is still going on. I think it's very tough to predict. I think you're right. I think, Kansas City will obviously be one of the top teams, easily an AFC contender. They have their issues, like you said. I think, their defense, it's always been a defense I look at. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. It kind of gets the job done. And, if you get shut down, if your defensive line gets shut down like they did in the Super Bowl against Tom Brady and, the likes of them, the skills positions they got, you're going to have a bad time. And, their defense struggled in that game. But like you said, my main takeaway from that game was their offensive line was absolutely terrible. I believe they had a few injuries to the tackle positions. And it showed, Patrick Mahomes was under pressure the entire game. Their offense could never get going at all. All the dynamic guys you have, Tyreek Hill, he didn't really do much. I think he might have had 5 or 6 catches, but a lot of them were kind of when the game was out of reach. When the game was actually, in the balance, they did a great job against him. So I think, would you say that they're projected for 12 wins?
Yep, 12 wins is their over-under.
Yeah, I think that's about right. They're usually a team that goes around 13-3. So I think 12 wins is pretty fair. Um, Tampa Bay at 11.5. I think that's a decent prediction. I don't know if they'll go, 12-4 or anything like that, but I could see probably an 11-5 team. I think they probably will win the NFC South just because they kept pretty much everyone on that team. If they had lost somebody, I'd say, okay, maybe it's New Orleans division to win, but I think they'll probably win the division. Some of those other teams you mentioned, like I think you said Green Bay, Buffalo, and the Rams, I think they're all very good teams. I think they'll all make the playoffs. Um, but yeah, Garth, these betting odds, you can only go by so much. There's always one team that, tremendously overachieves. There's always one that, really underachieves. I think when you look at the AFC, it's absolutely loaded. You had 7 teams in the playoffs last year, and you still had a 10-win team miss the playoffs in the Dolphins. We'll see what they do in the draft. I think that's why it's kind of odd to make these odds before the draft because a team can just change it all in one night or, over the course of a weekend. So, but I'd say for the most part, just looking at the odds, really quick, I'd say most of the top teams are pretty fair predictions. I'm not seeing anything that, jumps out at me as ludicrous, but, it's kind of take it with a grain of salt, in my opinion.
Yeah, and looking down the list a little bit further, my Chargers predicted for 9. That gives me a little bit of optimism. Like you said, though, with it, this is kind of just a complete, crapshoot. But I feel like if we can be 9-7, 10-6, maybe that gives us a pretty good shot at playoffs. But yeah, obviously we still have the draft to go, and teams can greatly improve should they draft well. There is an offensive tackle still left on the market, Noah. The hype's kind of died down. It really isn't getting talked about too much. That's Orlando Brown out of Baltimore. This is a guy who the Ravens, still, I believe, want to move if possible. Maybe we'll see a big-time move when the draft comes up. Who knows? I know my Chargers were interested, but I was kind of reading a story here, and I'm a little bit shocked and puzzled myself. I found out that the Ravens had deals that they were willing to accept. The problem was Orlando Brown is demanding that if he be traded, he be re-signed to the biggest offensive lineman deal in the NFL. And I get the guys want to get their money. They want to make as much as possible, all that. But, this is a guy who doesn't have a long career in the NFL of being a starting offensive tackle and having, being like a perennial Pro Bowler or anything like that. He did come in last year for an injured player. Name's escaping me. I don't really follow the Ravens super closely.
Ronnie Stanley.
Right. And he stepped in for Ronnie Stanley, don't get me wrong, had a great season. But to me, if you're an NFL team, GM, whether it's my favorite team or not, I don't see how you can pick up a guy who's only played one season as a starting tackle in the NFL and re-sign him to the biggest offensive lineman deal in the NFL, especially when cap just went down for the season. And for a lot of teams, you need a lot more than just a star left offensive tackle.
It's really tough, Garth. At first, we kind of thought maybe the Ravens were actually asking a bit too much. But like you said, that they've had offers that they want to explore. I think Orlando Brown's a good player. Don't get me wrong. I know we've talked about him 2 or 3 times on the show so far. This is the guy that like you said, filled in for Ronnie Stanley. He's made Pro Bowls in 2019 and 2020. He's still only 24 years old. He's going to be 25 on May 2nd. So this is a guy that's still in his prime, still very young. He still has plenty of room to grow. But like you said, if you're going to trade for a guy and then you have to give him a massive contract like that, the highest paid in the NFL, that's going to, throw a lot of teams off. So I don't know if he'll move. I think, the longer it goes on, I think it's actually more likely he's going to stay. Because, if he wants that contract and no one's going to give it to him, then they can't really trade him. That's out of their control, what Ronnie Stanley wants once that team gets him. So I think he'll probably stay because, like you said, this trade talk has been on and off. It's been off for a long time. We haven't talked about it in a few weeks. Kind of came back a few days ago, but if it hasn't happened by now, Garth, I mean, maybe there's a blockbuster trade at the draft or something like that. If it doesn't happen by then, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and kind of shifting gears to the draft, Noah. One thing that's kind of a little bit of a controversial subject is I've seen a lot of people getting really fired up over Trevor Lawrence this week. It seems like, and for whatever reason, I don't want to get into it too much because it's, the type of topic that we try to stay out of here on the Sweet Tea Show. But, it seems like we get closer to the draft, there's certain players that, either things that they've done stupidly in the past gets brought to light and people try to tear them down. And sometimes it even affects their draft stock. But there's a lot of stuff coming out about what they call commitment issues or commitment comments from Trevor Lawrence, where basically he was saying that, football isn't the end all be all for him. He wants to do more or have more out of life than just play football. And, people are like, well, does that mean, that he's not going to give his 100% in the NFL? And, he's not committed to being a franchise guy and trying to win a team a Super Bowl. Should we really be drafting this guy at number one and hyping him up so much? And I've heard really mixed opinions on it. Some people feel really strongly with the type of things that I was just saying. And others actually feel the complete opposite, where they say, that's actually a pretty good attitude to have because he's just going to kind of go out there and do his own thing. And there's not going to be a whole lot of pressure because he's not really going to be worried about failing. He's just going to go out there and play his best football, not, kind of Jay Cutler-esque, not really giving a damn, just going out there and slinging the ball around. What are some of your thoughts on that one, Noah?
It's a real tough one, Garth. Obviously, especially with these high draft prospects, everything you do and say is going to be monitored. Like it's very important, and sure, some of it is. I don't think this is really that big a deal. You got to remember, Garth. Sure, these guys are football players and all that. They get paid a lot of money to do what they do. It's still just a game. They're just playing a glorified game and making a lot of money for it. There's more to life than football, Garth. There really is. It's only a few months out of the year. The rest of it, life kind of goes on as normal. So I don't have a problem with them saying that at all. He is right. There is more to stuff than football. You want to focus on more than football because if your entire life, revolves around football, I mean, don't get me wrong, football is great, but there's more to life than that, Garth. There really is. So I don't have a problem with that. I think it's just a classic case of this guy's, a massive draft prospect. Everything he does is going to be, monitored like he's on, house arrest. I don't see a big deal with it. I know the closer we get to the draft, you always see, so-and-so prospect gets linked to this thing they did 10 to 15 years ago. And that stuff really annoys me as well. But, just, it's not that big a deal, man. Just focus on what he can do on the football field. I've seen him play obviously for Clemson. But Garth, you got to remember, he came from Cartersville, Georgia. This is a guy I saw play before, a lot of people ever did. I would never doubt his commitment to his team. I think he's a fantastic player. There's a reason he's the consensus number one overall pick. That doesn't just come from nowhere. Those scouts, they watched him a lot. They know what he's capable of. They know what he can do. And they would. I think he's going to be fine. I think it's just a classic overreaction, in my opinion.
Yeah, I gotta agree there, Noah. Like I said, I think it can kind of be good in a way where this guy's just gonna go out there and sling the ball around and play to the best of his ability and not really get too much thought into it, get himself too caught up on the feeling of, oh, I gotta be the best of the best, and I have to beat everybody else, or this is gonna be a failure because he feels like there's more outside of football. And the reality of it, guys, is that these guys go into the NFL, and honestly, depending on the position, if you play 10 seasons in the NFL for most guys, that's a very long career. So, in the totality of these guys' life, this is a really short period of time. So, and like Noah said, regardless, there's more to life than just football, as much as we do love it. So I definitely get where it's coming from with that. But yeah, so we did get some free agency signings this week, Noah. The one that I feel like jumps out at everybody is Jadeveon Clowney to the Cleveland Browns. They're hoping that pairing him with Myles Garrett will end up being, a really good combination and bring out the best in him. Obviously, there's a lot of, I don't know if you'd call it question marks, but definitely some worries around the league because they're saying that, hey, we've seen Jadeveon Clowney be dominant, and we've also seen him not really be that good. In 2019, only 3 sacks, and last year with the Titans, done it all. I know he battled some injury, I believe. But basically, the Browns signed a 1-year, $10 million deal. So it's not a long-term, huge money contract. Yes, $10 million is, a little bit on the higher side for a 1-year deal, but it's still not going to break the bank. And like I said, they're pairing him with Myles Garrett. So, I think that this is probably a pretty good move for them. I feel like if he doesn't pan out, like I said, he's only there for a year. It's not really going to make your team, be in a worse off situation because he's not playing up to the level, or you have to bench him, or he gets injured, whatever. And if he does play up to the level we've seen him play at, it's going to drastically improve that defense. As I feel like pass rush is a huge, huge part of a defense. If you can get after the quarterback, that makes life for your defensive back in a pass happy league much, much easier. So, I like the move, honestly. I think it's a pretty good move by them.
I agree, Garth. I think, like you said, it's only 1 year. If it doesn't work out, they can just let him go. Jadeveon Clowney is a really tough one. I think when he's actually good and he's on, he's a very good player. This is a guy that's obviously made 3 Pro Bowls when he was with the Texans. He's shown he can be a very solid pass rusher. But I think, like you said, his problem is, obviously he's battled some injuries, and I think he's a very inconsistent player. Other than he's had those 3 good seasons, but he's also had a few down seasons, like you said, with the Seahawks. He only had 3 sacks that year. I don't know what exactly all that was going on with the Titans. I didn't watch them that in depth, but only played 8 games, had no sacks. So I think he's probably banged up the entire season. You got to remember, Garth, this is a guy that was a number 1 overall pick, not just a first round pick. This was a number 1 overall pick by the Houston Texans. That was the draft where they were getting linked to Johnny Manziel a lot. They took Jadeveon Clowney. He's a good player, but I think he's really fallen short of being a number 1 level player. Considering the fact you can think of a guy like, let's say, Mario Williams, who I believe was taken number 2 overall in 2006 by that exact same team. And, I think the impact that a guy like Mario Williams had on that team was way more than what Jadeveon Clowney ever did for them. So I think he's a good player. I just think he's very inconsistent, Garth. And, like you said, it's only 1 year deal. So, low risk, or potentially high reward. It just depends on what Clowney you get because, when he's on, he's a Pro Bowl level player. When he's not, he's nowhere to be found. And, I remember it's so long ago now, but it still feels like yesterday when he absolutely destroyed that Michigan running back, Vincent Smith. That play was absolutely incredible. So he's shown, he can be that bruiser, absolutely destroy a player when he can get to him, and, he can make an impact for sure. So we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, as you said there, no, we just got to wait and see which Jadeveon Clowney they get there in Cleveland. And just for a little bit of random facts, I like throwing random facts around. Jadeveon Clowney's played 7 seasons, I believe. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 7 seasons in the NFL, 32 career sacks. So that ends up being like 4 point something. My quick maths aren't the strongest right now, but it's 4 point something because 5 per season would be 35. So by no means is that, incredible. Oh my God, this guy's putting up career numbers every year. And for comparison, at my team, Joey Bosa has played 5 seasons, which one season he did have, a pretty significant injury where he missed most of the season. And he has had some, little nagging injuries here and there where he's missed a game or two. In 5 seasons, he's had 47.5 sacks. So, like you said there, Noah, for a guy who's been a number 1 overall draft pick, he hasn't really lived up to that hype yet. He is still young enough to where he could have, a couple good seasons, especially, as I said, opposite Garrett there in Cleveland. We're just, one of those guys we're going to have to wait and see. I feel like he either has a really, really good season or he doesn't have a good season at all, and he ends up being a free agent again next year.
Another thing, Garth, you have to remember, and this isn't a knock about Jadeveon Clowney. This is just what his entire career has been. He's always had that guy on the other side of him that's very good. Obviously, you consider J.J. Watt in Houston. I think when they took him, Garth, I think they want him to be kind of like another Mario Williams, who I just looked up to check, and he was also a number 1 overall pick. I think they wanted him to be that kind of dominant pass rusher to go with J.J. Watt. It just never worked out like that, and if it did, that would have been absolutely incredible for him. But I think what's important as well in him going to Cleveland is, like you said, Myles Garrett is there. This isn't a signing to where, he's going to be one of their premier pass rushers or anything like that. They still have a guy like Myles Garrett. I believe Sheldon Richardson is still there, unless he moved. I don't think he did. He says he's a free agent, but, they still have some really good players there, Garth. Maybe I'll just pull up their roster real quick and take a look at the defensive line. But, I mean, yeah, they got Jadeveon Clowney and they still got Garrett. They got Takk McKinley, my guy. It still says Sheldon Richardson is there, actually. That's a bit interesting. Andrew Billings. So, I mean, they have some guys here, Garth. It's not like they got nobody. And, they got linebackers they can use as well to pass rush. So, I think Cleveland, they're going to make the playoffs again, in my opinion. I think it was fantastic what they did last year. I think the key thing for them, Garth, and I was kind of thinking about this week. Why haven't they traded Odell Beckham? And I'm not usually the kind of guy to say, oh, trade the star player just because of all the crap surrounding him, and we know what he is. All the stuff that he's a media circus. But that's why I'm not saying they should trade him. I think, and I brought this up several times during the season, when he went down, and I don't know what it was, but as soon as he went down, you saw Baker Mayfield play 100 times better than he had the start of that season and the entire season before. And I think when Odell is there, he forces a lot of passes to him. It leads to mistakes, it leads to incompletions and turnovers. When he wasn't there, he started to spread the ball out a lot better. And I think you saw Baker Mayfield go from a quarterback that was getting a lot of hate, a lot of criticism. The last 75% of the season, I think he had a very good year. They won a playoff game, made the playoffs. For a team like the Browns, that was unheard of. The important thing for them is, can they do that again? And I think if they traded a guy like Odell, now I don't know the contract numbers. Maybe they can't do it because of dead cap, but if they could do it, you can get a lot back potentially. And I think it might actually improve their team, because I think Baker Mayfield played better without him.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree there more with you, Noah. I do believe it's if they've even tried to shop him on the market. I know he is under a massive contract, I think, and I could be wrong. I want to say his salary number for the season is somewhere around the 20 million mark. So it's definitely a very big contract in a year, as I said, where the salary cap got decreased. But if I'm the Browns, I'm looking at it as, like you said, Baker played better without him. The team did better without him on the field. You were able to make playoffs. You were able to win a playoff game without having him on the field. And in terms of salary cap, he's taking up a pretty good chunk of it. So, why would you want to keep this guy? But I guess, if they are dead set on keeping him, maybe they feel like they still haven't gotten the best out of him. I'm not really sure there. It's just kind of one of those moves that, makes you scratch your head a little bit. But
Yeah, and
I don't really know how Browns fans feel about it. I don't really know any Browns fans to ask them whether they, really want him to stay there, Noah, or if they kind of think like us and say, hey, maybe we should try getting rid of this guy.
I'm not gonna pretend like I know a lot of Browns fans, Garth. I do know a few. I know there are some that actually want to move him, and I just pulled up his contract real quick just to look at it. His base salary for 2021 is 14.5. That's going to be a cap hit about 15.75. The dead cap for moving him is 12.8, pretty much. So it's not ideal. It is a good amount of money, but considering you see guys with the contracts, Garth, to where the dead cap is something like 30 to 50 million, I think if they absolutely wanted to move him, they could. What I think they might be doing, now that I look at his contract a little more in depth, I think they might be waiting to trade him until next year, because what I have here on Spot Track, and it could be wrong, I'm not seeing any dead cap for 2022 or 2023. So maybe they're waiting just because they don't want to take on that 12.8 million in dead cap. But like I said, I think the Browns are relatively fine salary cap wise. I think if they wanted to take that on, they could. Maybe they just don't want to. I'm just going to look up their cap real quick. The Cleveland Browns, yeah, they still have 21.4 million in cap space, so the dead cap isn't a problem. So, it's really interesting there, Garth. I think if I looked it up and they had cap space problems, I could understand why he hasn't been moved. But he's still there, and they have space to make some moves. So we'll see, man. We'll see.
Yeah, as you said, maybe they're holding off. But the other thing with that, too, is the longer you wait, unless he has a phenomenal season this year, I feel like the less you're going to end up getting out of him. Because, it's one thing to have for a player to have one down season. But once you start having 2 or 3 down seasons, you're not getting anywhere near like a first round draft pick out of, and we've seen a lot of trades, it feels like, within the past year or two where, teams give away pretty good players for, what feels like absolutely nothing. I know my Chargers trade Desmond King for something like a 7th round draft pick, which still, I try not to think about it because it honestly infuriates me. That was a guy that I really loved. He was a young guy, and DB was a position that we absolutely needed, and even more so now with where we're at there. But, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what their plans with him are. Obviously, I hope he has a great season. I never root for players to have bad seasons. I like to see all those guys go out and play to their best, and every team play to their best, and whoever plays a little bit better than the other gets the win. But with that said, Noah, let's touch on a couple things real quickly before I wrap us up here. Fortunately, as always, I do have to be up for work in the morning. But I want to give a shout out, and I don't know if anybody was able to watch it, but this week is one of the weeks where we have 3 Supercross races within a week span. So they did race Tuesday night over there in Atlanta, in your home state of Georgia, Noah. And Ken Roxon finally got another win. And did he do it in epic fashion? He got out in the lead early, Noah, and he kept it, and he just blew away from everybody. And even better than Kenny is still pretty good, point differential, but definitely not something that he can overcome if he's able to win a couple more races here in the second half of the season. So I'm really, really excited now. It seems like every time I'm about to give up on Kenny winning the championship, he gives me just enough, to get me back excited and following really closely again.
It's stressful, isn't it, Garth? I tell you what, man. This championship race has been back and forth, like you said. Ken Roxon was leading at first. He had a terrible run, and Cooper Webb comes out of nowhere. He starts to look like he's taking over, and then, like you said, that was an absolutely massive win. He needed that win desperately, and like you said, Cooper Webb actually had a bit of a down race. Just looking at the standings right now, Cooper Webb's 13 points out in front, 313 for Webb, 300 for Roxon. Still got Eli Tomac at 278, so maybe he's not out of it just yet. But yeah, Garth, I mean, the results are absolutely crazy. I think not only was the win crucial for Ken Roxon, it's very important that Cooper Webb had a down race because he needs to start closing that gap and fast. Um, just looking at the results, you got the Atlanta races, you got Salt Lake City. It's coming right down to Garth. I think you're going to see an absolutely wild into the season. It's so close this late in the season. Um, you know, it, it's anyone's guess what's going to happen. I can just only hope it goes right down to the wire, just like I hope will happen with Formula One.
Yeah, and this with COVID and them trying to get the season to work to the best of their ability. This is the first time ever in Supercross. For those of you who didn't know that we've had any races during a weekday, let alone 3 races total within the span of a week. And it's kind of a really cool factor because it cuts down on time traveling. So the guys are able to stay a little bit more fresher as they're in one place for a whole week versus racing one night and then flying to the next city across the country. And 2, what I've noticed personally, Noah, is if the track suits a rider, they can get really, really hot. Like Kenny was able to win 3 races. He swept that Texas series, and he obviously won Tuesday night. There's one more race on Saturday night left in Atlanta. Should the track be very similar, it's very, very likely that he could have the same type of race, win 2 out of 3. And if Cooper struggles again, and the weird thing is, no, we're saying struggle. This is how good Cooper is. 5th or 6th place for him, to most people is considered struggling. But should he finish 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere in there? I mean, anything behind Kenny makes up points, but should he finish closer to that, 5th through 10th spot, all of a sudden we only have something like a 5, 6, 7 point gap. I feel like this Saturday night is probably the biggest race of the championship because I feel like we're either going to see Cooper go out there and win like we're so accustomed to see him doing, and that just be a huge dagger in the championship. Or we see Kenny pull out another win and really, really close that gap and make it have to come down to the final couple of races. I'm just super excited as a huge Supercross fan.
Yeah, me too, Garth. And obviously, it's very interesting. Cooper Webb, like you said, he's just so good that I'm not going to say he's the equivalent of, but it kind of reminds me of if Lewis Hamilton came in 5th and 6th, everyone would be like, "Oh my God, he had such a terrible race." What's wrong with Lewis Hamilton? And there's so many drivers that would could only wish they could be up in 5th or 6th place. So I think Cooper Webb will obviously be wanting to rebound. Ken Roxon, to me, from what I've seen, Garth, and obviously you've watched a lot longer than me, so maybe you disagree. I think he's a guy that if he starts well, he's great. but I know he's had a few races where he makes a mistake early on. He kind of has to battle back from the pack, and sometimes he can only get up to fifth or sixth, something like that. I think if he gets that pole position, he gets the gate he wants, and he can get going. He's one of those guys that's just kind of gone. But if you can make it difficult for him and he has to battle a lot, maybe he can make a mistake, stuff like that. Um, that's kind of what I've seen from him. So I think the key for Ken, like you said, is he needs to stay hot. He needs to keep, obviously keep getting out in front to where, he has this clean space to drive or ride. And, he can basically leave people in the dust if he gets that. Um, for Cooper Webb and Eli Tomac, they just have to make it difficult for him, make him battle as much as possible. Because, this is a very tough sport. All these bikes flying, it's very easy to crash, and make a mistake and stuff like that. So, just make it as tough as possible. But if he can keep that momentum, if he, I think he's one of those guys that, if you let him get in front and, he's about a second ahead, it's over.
Yeah, and I find it very strange. I think this is my first time ever in my history of watching Supercross and following dirt bike racing that I can say that I'm rooting really, really hard for Eli Tomac because he is one of the very few guys in the field that is capable of finishing ahead of Cooper. So I'm obviously rooting really hard for him to not win, but stay in front of Cooper. So that Kenny can finish more than one position ahead of Cooper, obviously. But yeah, much like Formula One and Lewis Hamilton, as you said, this is a sport where consistency is everything. If you take the guy who's the fastest, most talented racer, but he can only win 3 or 4 races a year, and then the other 3 or 4 races, he's back there around 10th, he is not going to win a championship. You take a guy who's going to be in the top 3 pretty much every single race, he's going to win the championship. We saw that with a guy in Ryan Dungey who never was the most talented, never was the fastest rider out there, but he consistently placed in the top 3. And because of that, he won, so many championships. I actually had a debate with a guy the other day at work that I work with, Noah. If he's watching this, which I highly doubt, this would be kind of funny. But, he came up to me and, we kind of got on the subject of things and one thing led to another. And we started talking about dirt bike racing and Supercross. And, he kind of said, I feel like riding a dirt bike isn't that hard because you're kind of just sitting there. And I was like, man, you couldn't be more wrong. From somebody who's played a lot of different sports. I run track and field, played football, played baseball, raced dirt bikes, powerlifting. I've never been a pro at anything, but, I've dabbled in what it feels like pretty much everything. And man, racing dirt bikes is tough. No, I told him not only is it mentally tough, you imagine taking somebody and going, all right, if you hit this jump, say there's a 100-foot gap in between the jump and the landing. If you don't hit it hard enough and you come up short, you're crashing and it's going to hurt very badly. Or if you jump it and go too far and land past your landing spot, you're also going to crash and get hurt really badly. That in itself is very, very tough for a lot of people to wrap their brain around and be able to, handle. But on top of that, it is an intensive cardiovascular endurance type of racing. There's a really cool series called Science of Supercross where they go over stuff like that and, like the mechanics behind the bike and, the body and how it reacts to certain things in Supercross. And, when guys are racing in Supercross, they get up to like 95% of their heart's maximum capacity for heart rate, and they have to maintain that for like 20 minutes. So basically imagine taking somebody who is a world-class sprinter and getting their heart rate to where it gets and then throwing them onto a dirt bike to fly, 50, 60 feet high up in the air and at times 120 feet lengthwise. I kind of got off on a tangent there, but this is a really tough sport, guys. And I just, as somebody who's watched it a lot and done it, not at a pro level, but, done it, I just have such a great appreciation for not only motocross and supercross, but motorsports in general. I know I sent you the video the other day of the intense Formula One training, Noah. I just have a huge appreciation for these guys and what they do.
Yeah, man, me too. I mean, I've never done, dirt bike race or anything like that. I've watched it. That's not something I would ever do, Garth. Just the speeds that they go at, like you said, the physical exertion it requires. And then they're going, sometimes up to 100 feet in the air on this little, little dirt bike that if it hits even remotely the wrong way, it's flying off and you're going to be severely hurt. I definitely wouldn't say that's easy. I know I would never do it. I'd be way too scared to do it. But yeah, I mean, obviously Supercross with Formula One, you got these guys that are going, 200 miles per hour, and you got sometimes 2 or 3 cars going in this little tiny corner that you just have to get so and so right. And if you do it wrong, you're spinning off and potentially in the gravel, hitting a wall, and your car's broken. Um, I mean, it just takes so much work, so much effort. And I remember that video you sent me of Sergio Perez doing the training. I mean, it just looks absolutely grueling, man. And, some people try to say they're not athletes. I mean, bullshit, in my opinion. But that we've gone over that. That's for another time. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely not easy. No way at all.
Yeah, I just want to add to that if you have to train your body to not be blacking out from the forces exerted onto it, that in itself, whether it's in a car, airplane, whatever, that I just can't even fathom because I've never had any experience with it. But obviously that's something that's very tough, takes a lot of dedication, a lot of training, and not any just average Joe is going to hop up off their couch and go out there and do it with ease, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here, Noah. But I do want to mention to you guys before we go ahead and get off here, me and Noah are going to try and get on the draft special that Brian and all of our other buddies over at Sportsbox are going to be putting on, which if you guys have never tuned into is, really, really phenomenal. It's perfect to have up on your phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever, while you're watching the draft. We give live reactions, we give predictions, we go over everything NFL draft, and a lot of those guys do a really, really good job. So definitely tune into that. We don't have any set date or specific time that we're going to be on yet, but we will keep you guys updated as we find out more and everything gets squared away with that. And other than that, just like I said, tune into Supercross on Saturday night. It's a really, really big race in terms of championship, and I do believe we have a Formula One race this weekend. Noah, correct me if I'm wrong. We do.
Yep, we have qualifying tomorrow, and then they're going to Imola on Sunday for the um, Emilia Romana, however you say it, Grand Prix. I pulled up the free practice times today, Garth. Obviously, it's really tough to predict based on that, but I'm looking at it real quick. Bottas number 1 and Hamilton number 2. So potentially with Perez down at number 6 and Verstappen's 14. I don't know if that's completely representative, but we have to remember this is a race Lewis Hamilton won last season. Both of the Mercedes are looking really good in practice. We'll see what happens in qualifying. It's looking like Mercedes could have a good race, but yeah, like you said, I mean, so much going on. Obviously, we're going to try and be on the draft coverage. I think they said we're going to be on day 2, which is Friday. So obviously, no Sweet Tea show that week. Also, for me personally, this Tuesday, the 20th, looks like I'm going to be on Highly Opinionated talking about the state of the Atlanta Falcons, just like you were with the Chargers a few weeks ago. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I mean, a lot is coming up, man, and we're going to be busy as hell covering all of it.
Yeah, and definitely tune in, guys. That's the Highly Opinionated show every Tuesday night with Brian and Mike. And obviously, as Noah said, he's going to be on this Tuesday for a bit as well. So definitely tune into that. They put on a great show. They're going to talk some Falcons and some other teams as well. And we'll be on that draft special. And, if you guys don't have anything going on, tune into the Formula One race on Sunday. To me, I'd much rather wake up early Sunday, watch Formula One, than, sit down and watch NASCAR for 3 or 4 hours. Nothing NASCAR, just, I definitely rather watch one. But yeah, one last thing, Noah, if those Mercedes are dialed in, both Bottas and Hamilton are having a really good race, that's going to make it really tough for Verstappen. So hopefully, free practice was, just kind of a fluke for Team Red Bull, and hopefully Verstappen does much better in qualifying. We're just, going to have to wait and see how that turns out.
Yeah, I think he will. There's no way, Garth, that Verstappen's going to qualify 14th tomorrow. There's just no way. I think the Red Bulls will be way higher than that, but I think that Mercedes pace might actually be representative. They might be the favorites for this race. But obviously we'll have to see. It's only the second race of the season. We don't know how it's going to go just yet. And, I think you and I are both in full agreement. We want to see an actual competitive championship race for once. So that would require the Red Bulls to actually take the fight to the Mercedes. So, we'll see what happens qualifying tomorrow. I'm going to be waking up, nice and early for that. So it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, and I know I keep saying this, but I got to add real quickly before I wrap us up here. As much as we say we'd like to see somebody challenge Hamilton for that number 1 spot, I would also like to see somebody really challenge hard for that 3rd spot, because it seems like it's either Verstappen or Bottas in 3rd. whichever one of them has the worst race out of the two. I'd like to see somebody else get up there and really challenge the two of them. I'm Team Red Bull. I really like Verstappen, but overall, Formula One for me is a sport where I just like to see a lot of competitiveness. I like to see a lot of overtaking. I like to see there be big time battles late in the race instead of everybody, just kind of spread out by themselves, one guy running away with the race. So, I just hope we have a really good race overall, Noah, and may the best man and the best car win this weekend.
Absolutely, Garth. And I think if last race is an indication, there was a lot of midfield overtaking and stuff like that. And even the fight for the lead was really close. So, I think you could see someone potentially challenge for a lot of podiums there. I think that, you look at McLaren with Lando Norris. I think he's a really awesome young up-and-coming driver. I think the Ferraris, Garth, have also really surprised me as well. I think they were good last race. I believe they finished something like 6th and 8th. And in free practice for this Grand Prix, I think they were 4th and 5th. So, potentially they could be in play as well. But, yeah, I mean, it's looking really close, Garth. I'm really excited if it keeps up like this.
Yeah, and as much as they've been down lately now, I just keep kind of saying to myself that I feel like it's only a matter of time before Ferrari is able to compete again. Whether it be a year or 5 years from now, just that, eventually they're going to be competing again. I just don't see them, not for, the rest of eternity of Formula One. But yeah, really looking forward to it, Noah. As always, thank you, man, for coming on. I feel like we had a really good show tonight. Despite me being honestly pretty exhausted, I kind of been fighting to stay awake here towards the end of the show, but I love being on here with you guys and talking sports. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Noah, for being here tonight. And unless you have something you want to add real quick, I'll go ahead and wrap us up.
I'm good, man. You said everything I need to say. It was a great show once again.
All right, guys. As always, Noah Dog Deibler, Garth Charger Patrick. Thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you have a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you here again next Friday night. And, everybody enjoy your weekend. Peace out, guys.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sweet Tea on the Sports Box. Please remember to follow us on all of our social media outlets. On Facebook at Sportsbox Show, Twitter at Sportsbox Show, Instagram at The Sportsbox Show. Find us on YouTube and join Outside the Box, our Facebook sports discussion group. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And also our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and use promo code THEBOX at sign up for 10 free points. Thank you for joining us.